All right, ladies and gentlemen, from the dark side into the bright, please help me welcome Mr. Kevin MITNICK. Hey, Kevin. Hey, take a seat.
Great to be here.
How do you feel about that when people introduce you from the dark side into the bright?
I don't mind. I mean,
is it true?
Well, I was a black hat, many years ago, and now I'm a white hat. So I guess it's an okay introduction. Actually, it was quite funny when I was in federal custody. The officials there labeled me the dark side hacker, and I don't know where they got that term, because I think they thought dark side hacking equals dark side hacker. Who knows?
I mean, people talk about you and say you are a bad hacker turned good hacker. But we've been talking a lot now in preparation for today. I mean, you don't seem like the type of guy who wants to shut down the power grid all over North America.
Well, you got to figure out where I started. I actually started in this hobby of phone phreaking. Phone phreaking, and it was about exploring the telephone network, right? And this is the same hobby that Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak had back in the mid-'70s. They built blue boxes, they sold them on Berkeley's campus. That's how they started Apple Computer, by the way. But I was interested in manipulating the telephone system to pull pranks on friends. And I used to, for example, modify a friend's home telephone to a payphone, so whenever his parents try to make a call and say, please deposit 25 cents. So I used to do these kind of pranks, and I wanted to get better at manipulating the telecom system more for exploration and for challenge. And I remember when I was in high school, a student who knew I was into this phone phreaking stuff said, hey, Kevin, you might want to take a computer class, because he just started it. You had to be a senior, but I was a junior at the time. And I met the instructor. He says, well, you can't come into class. You're not a senior. And then my friend was there, and he said, show Mr. Christ what you can do with the telephone. So I started showing all these hacks I can do with the phone. He says, I'm letting you in class. And the first programming assignment he gave the class was to write a Fortran program to find the first 100 Fibonacci numbers. And I thought that was boring. That's too easy, right? So I figured I'd write a different program to steal the teacher's password. That's a cooler program. So when it came around time to hand in the homework, he goes, where's your Fibonacci assignment? And I didn't have it. And he goes, I stuck my neck out. I let you into class, and you didn't even do the homework. And I said, well, I did a better program. I wrote a program. And he goes, well, to do what? I go, to steal your password? Isn't your password blah, blah, blah? And his face turned white. And he goes, how did you do that? And I showed him the code. It wasn't in Fortran. It was in actually what we call Basic Plus back then. And he was so excited about the program, he put it all up on the chalkboard, showed the other students, and gave me a lot of attaboys. And he said, this is so cool. So back when I was in high school, hacking was cool, and you were encouraged to do it. That was the ethics.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that. I mean, when you did that, the teacher actually put it up on the board and bragged about the student hacking. What would happen today if a student did that?
I think you'd go to the principal's office, and they'd probably call the cops.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a different world back then, where hacking when I grew up was, kind of the cool thing to do. And that's kind of the track that started me in this, direction of becoming the world's most wanted hacker at one point.
You also spent some time, you were telling me, in dumpsters and trash bins.
Yeah, not looking for food, looking for information. And one of the places, I used to go, and it used to be friends would go as well, is we'd go to Pacific Telephone. That was the phone company in Los Angeles, California. We'd look for discarded hardware, and especially discarded manuals. Manuals and notes, passwords, and this type of thing that people would throw in the trash. And at one point, we found that, well, first of all, if you're ever doing dumpster diving, and you pull a bag out of the trash and you shake it, and it feels like liquid or has any paper towels inside, put it aside. You don't want to go through that bag. So anyway.
Who comes up with these terms, by the way? Phone phreaking and dumpster diving.
Well, it's known. Oh, it's known in the area of, this computer hacking security and stuff. So anyway, we found that in a smaller trash bag that somebody went through the trouble of ripping up a document in tiny bits of paper. It looked like confetti. And we decided to take this, glob of confetti over to a donut house, like a Starbucks almost, and we put it together over 3 hours, and it was the entire username and password list to one of the phone company's most sensitive systems. Moral of the story, use a cross shredder, don't do it by hand. So even today, when I teach social engineering workshops, we go out and we get trash from like high-tech areas of companies, and we actually still find credentials, source code that's printed out, and still people throw away a lot of valuable information in the trash, even today, and I did that 30 years ago.
You went to prison.
Yes,
As a matter of fact, if the timeline's correct, it was 20 years ago this month, right, when you were the most wanted computer criminal in the United States, right? And you were caught. Was it 20 years ago this week? Is that right?
February, Valentine's Day, 1995,
okay.
So you're about right.
Okay. So you went to prison. Did you have an epiphany while you were in prison, or did something change that made you decide, okay, I'm going to come out of prison and I'm going to do what you do now, and that is you consult with businesses about how they can protect themselves from hackers?
Well, I had no clue what I was going to do when I got out of prison, because at the time the federal government treated me like I was MacGyver. I mean, literally, if I had a 9-volt battery and duct tape, that I could somehow, launch a nuclear weapon. In fact, I was held in solitary confinement because a judge had told a prosecutor in court when I was applying for bail that not only do we have to hold Mr. Mitnick in jail, but we have to make sure he can't get access to a telephone, or he could dial up into NORAD, into their modem, whistle into the phone, and launch a nuclear weapon. So,
but was the judge really off? Now, come on.
I started laughing in court because I thought this guy was a total idiot, and the judge isn't going to believe anything he says. And the next words out of her mouth, he says, well, Mr. Weidman, I think you're right. Mr. Mitnick is a national security threat, and we're going to have to make sure he doesn't get access to a phone. And I ended up in solitary confinement for a year.
But you did tell us, Kevin, though, that there were times when you were hacking and you actually got into the Pentagon, right? Pentagon files.
No, that's a myth. But I did hack into the National Security Agency, but into the telephone system, NSA. I didn't break into any and steal any NSA files or anything like that, but I wanted to climb Mount Everest, and I figured if I could wiretap the NSA, that would be cool. And by the way, I was 17 years old, and I did it from the high school computer lab. So what I worked out is, because of my knowledge of the phone system at the time, I was able to access a telephone company switch in Laurel, Maryland, which handles Fort Meade. And I was able to set up a monitor number in that switch. And by the way, back then, it was just knowing the secret number to dial up. You didn't even need credentials. If you knew the number to the switch, you're right into it. So basically, I was able to set up a phone number, call into it, and it would just give me a weird tone. Then I can get on the switch and command it to connect to different trunks, and I could listen to conversations. So I was able to list out the trunk groups of the NSA's primary number, which is 301-688-6311. I still remember it. And then I actually started listening to a conversation. I go, oh man, that's so cool, after like 10 seconds, and I just disconnected and never did it again, afraid that I'd get caught. But yeah, so when I was 17, I wiretapped the wiretappers.
Do you think you could today, if you wanted to, you could get access to the NSA?
I don't know. To their public, to their telephone network, on what they call the public switch telephone network, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, all I have to do is read Snowden files. I have instant access.
That's right.
but as far as getting into, yeah, I don't know. I don't know their security measures. I would assume that they would have the highest level of security measures possible. But then you look at the Snowden case, and you have a guy inside the NSA who's able to basically copy everything onto drives and walk out the door. So it's really unknown.
Let me ask you,
I really wonder.
I mean, you are the world's most famous hacker. Is the NSA hacker-proof?
I don't think so. I mean, look what Ed Snowden was able to show, that some guy inside could walk out with all their confidential files. I mean, I don't think anything's hacker-proof, to be honest with you.
What did you think when you heard that the German Chancellor Angela Merkel's cell phone had been tapped?
First thing I wanted to know was the make and model. I wanted to know, was it a Nokia phone, was it an iPhone? Because I was curious of what type of exploit was used. I wasn't surprised at all, in the least. I was thinking that would be something that the spy agencies would do. They would try to wiretap each other. And what I was more surprised is that it got out into the public.
We've talked all week about data security. You know, data security is a big topic here in Germany as well, but
yeah, that's what I do for a living.
Also around the world. Are we more threatened today than we have ever been in terms of having our data compromised, invaded, our identities stolen?
Well, it's kind of a two-way street, because back, in the 1990s, when I was active as a black hat, you had to write your own tools, and systems were less protected. People were less knowledgeable, less security aware. And today, a lot of people, now you have, cajillion companies developing security products. People are much more aware about security. But now you have a lot more hacking tools available, a lot more sources in the community, tools, open source tools, commercial tools. So it's kind of a balance, But I have to tell you, is when we're hired to break into our client systems, whether it's physically, whether it's technically, whether it's using social engineering by manipulating the people, we get in 100%. 100% of the time. The only time we don't is when they narrow the scope of the assessment down to like a few IP addresses, and they only have us look at the network side.
Right.
Then maybe not. Then we don't have that success rate. But they say you can test our applications, you could try social engineering, you could try to hack our wireless network. We get it.
That's pretty scary.
It's pretty scary. And then when you look about these companies like Sony that get hacked all the time, it's like, it didn't have to be I don't know if North Korea paid people to do it, or if it was a different group. But to me, I think it would be easy. The reason is Sony has a lot of, different, networks, might be flat, meaning they might not do any type of network segmentation.
Yeah.
And there's just too many vectors and a lot of network real estate there. And I don't think they're a hard target at all.
What do you think we should be more afraid of today? Should we be more afraid of state-sponsored hackers? We hear about a lot of that in China, in Russia, for example. Or should we be more afraid of people who are maybe the bad version of you?
Both. I think we should be concerned
the
about.
threat is equal?
Well, I think the average person on the street really has to be concerned about the criminal, right? Right. Or somebody that targets them. But of course, we're all victims of government mass surveillance, right? So as I mentioned, I see all this stuff, people trying to change the government in the United States, people hemming and hawing, and I think to me it's a waste of time. Because I don't think the government's going to change. I think what the people need to do is start using the tools to encrypt their communications. Okay. Encrypted email, using encrypted VoIP apps to have encrypted conversations and encrypted text. I think people have to take their privacy into their own hands, use the tools that are out there properly, and if they use them properly, it makes it a lot more costly for an attacker to try to compromise those communications.
Let's talk about the tools that we use. One that you'll find everywhere here are USB sticks, right? Right. They're everywhere, even at the conference.
Well, everyone's heard of Stuxnet, right?
Right. So what should the audience know about USB?
I'd be still careful of USB sticks, because even though the security industry and Microsoft, for example, has advised people, if you turn, they turn off what they call auto run, so code doesn't automatically run. They make it in the default configuration where if you plug in a USB stick, it's not going to work. But of course, as the industry figures out how to mitigate risk, there's always new and clever people that figure out new ways to compromise. In fact, I'll show a quick demo with a USB.
Let's do it.
Great. So some of you may have heard this. This is actually, this attack was actually discussed at Black Hat in Las Vegas. And this attack was actually developed by a guy named Carsten Knoll. He actually lives in Berlin, I believe. He's a brilliant researcher. And this is called the bad USB attack. And what this does is it exploits the flaw in the controller firmware on the USB, and I'm able to change this USB into an HID device to act as a keyboard to inject keystrokes to actually drop a malware payload. So I'm going to show you how this works. It's really easy. So first of all, let me go over to the Mac here. Password's Kevin123 in case anybody was curious. And people always ask me for my password. And then I'll change it to 1234 next month. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring up, let me make this larger. What you're looking at here is just what we call a Trojan listener. And basically, it's going to look for connections from compromised machines. It's a modified version of a tool called Dark Comment. And what it does is, once a computer is infected, we're going to see it pop up here, and then we're going to see what control we have. And over here, we have a Windows 7 system. I just patched it last night, updated, updated McAfee antivirus, so it's the latest version of McAfee with the latest updates. And one second. So this is the typical system some target's going to have in their home environment. So if we could bring, yeah, that's a good one. So what we have here is the patch system. We have McAfee running down here. You see, you'll see the little icon for McAfee. Fully patched Windows 7. So we're going to stick in the USB. And what I want you to do is pay attention to up here on the attacker machine. This attacker machine is actually in London. It's not here. I'm connected to it. And this machine is actually physically here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in the USB stick. It's going to pop up. And how do you get people to plug in a USB stick? Here, I'm going to format it, by the way, make sure it's clean. And then we'll discuss how to get people to plug these things in. So we're going to format it. You found the stick. You want to format it. It's clean. And then I want you to pay attention and watch the Windows machine, because I have it timed. Usually you time it when there's idle time, when nobody's around, when somebody goes to lunch, they leave their office, and it will inject the keystrokes to drop a payload from the internet. So just keep watching this. It should be about 15 seconds. I set it for 15 to 20 seconds, and it should pop up any second. There it goes. That's it. But that would happen not immediately. Of course, when I'm doing this demo, I do it right here in front of you. And in a second, we should see the Trojan pop up here. Give it a second. Sometimes takes 20 seconds. And it's a rootkitted Trojan. There it is. Right? So this machine isn't even in our building. This is in London. And this is a piece of malware you don't want on your system. Basically, if we look at the functionality of this, it's nothing special. You could upload and download files. You could look at stored passwords. Let me show you that really quick. You could modify the registry. You could turn somebody's laptop into a room bug. So if they're using a laptop, you can enable the microphone, capture the audio files, and then transfer those audio files at any time. So essentially it becomes a room bug. Now there's a password there to VPN, CeBIT rocks. I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of small. Okay. And the coolest one that I like, one of my favorites,